Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. Tonight, we have as our guest my friend Andrew Booth from MedPro Group. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Hey, Anthony. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I understand that you are among the lucky few who have been doing a little bit of traveling during these crazy times. Tell us what that's been like. What's it been like getting on a plane during a global pandemic?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've traveled twice, once for business, once personally. When I traveled for business, I traveled through Atlanta often, going to different places. Actually, my trip was to Atlanta, to Georgia area. And if you know anything about Atlanta airport, it's just massive and packed. And so being at that airport and maybe, 10% of the people that are normally there flying through TSA pre-check in Atlanta was kind of weird. Being on the plane, I mean, other than wearing a mask was pretty ordinary. They give you a little snack bag, instead of, picking your drinks.
Yeah, they treat you a little better than they normally do.
Yeah. So that was good. And then I traveled with my family a couple of months ago, and we got caught up. Not only, the COVID stuff was pretty straightforward, but we got caught up in the hurricane in the Caribbean. So we had to go to Puerto Rico for 2 hours, and then Florida. So it's good.
Yeah. Well, and it's probably nice to have a little bit less traffic in the airport and in security and all those things. I mean, hopefully we get back to normal someday soon, but for now, it's not all bad.
No, it wasn't. I remember driving through downtown Atlanta at 70 miles an hour. I don't think I've ever done that before, and so that was pretty nice.
Yeah, there's always a silver lining.
Right.
Well, thanks for being here. You've got a fascinating story, so I want to get right to it. And as you know, on this podcast, we talk about a few different things. We talk about your career path, and that's one of the things I'm especially interested in, given your background. We talk about your organization, and then some of the challenging, interesting, frustrating, whatever is on your mind in terms of projects that you're working on at these times when everyone needs a little empathy and to understand what others are going through. So we'll start with your career path. Obviously, everyone, you can tell by Andrew's accent that he is not a Northeast Indiana native. We've had some non-natives on the podcast, Brian Englehart, who's from the East Coast, and Scott Heiderman is from, I believe he's from Minnesota originally. And Andrew wins the award for having traveled here from the furthest away. So tell us where you grew up and how you ended up in Northeast Indiana.
Sure. So first of all, I got to tell you that my accent is really screwed up. When I'm in Fort Wayne, Northeast Indiana, or the U.S., people think I have a British, sometimes Australian accent. When I'm in the U.K., people think I have an American accent. So it is totally messed up. I grew up in the west part of Wales, which is the western part of the United Kingdom. I lived in Wales till I was 18. When I was 18, I lived in London for a year. And then I started my degree in music at a conservatoire in the north of England. So I kind of started with, well, first of all, before going to university for music, I thought I was going to be a teacher. Then I decided I didn't have the patience to be a teacher. So thankfully, I figured that out before, a 20-year career.
Sure.
So I was studying music in the UK, came to visit Fort Wayne to visit some friends. Essentially, the short version of the story is I met a girl and fell in love, told my parents that I was moving to Fort Wayne, Indiana. They had no really idea where that was. I transferred my degree to Taylor University. They had a small campus here in Fort Wayne that no longer is in operation. So I moved to Fort Wayne when I was 20. I'm 42 now, so I've lived here 22 years. So I've lived in Fort Wayne longer than I've lived in the UK. This very much feels like home. My wife is from Fort Wayne. She grew up, whole family, big family here. And so Fort Wayne is, it's very different than the UK. I mean, Wales is very mountainous. It's by the ocean. I've been trying to find mountains and the oceans in Indiana since I got here, and haven't found any yet.
Yeah, so Wales being, obviously much more bucolic and rural than, if you will, than London. I think when anyone speaks with an English accent, everyone always assumes they're from London. So what brought you to London, and what was that experience like going from Wales to the big city?
Well, first of all, anytime someone uses words like bucolic, they sound intelligent, because I'm not even sure I know what that means. But so when I graduated from high school, before I went to university, I decided to take a year out. and I worked for a not-for-profit that was based in southeast London, really reaching out to kind of kids who who were kind of struggling. I'd never, I mean, Cardiff, the city that I grew up in, was probably about the size of Fort Wayne. It was actually the fastest growing city in Europe, but maybe, but during that time was much, much smaller. Going to London and living in London was an amazing experience. I think it's a bit like New York. When you go to visit New York, there is so much to do. There is so much going on. There is so much energy, and then you're exhausted.
Yeah.
Living in London was a bit like that.
Okay.
It was a tremendous experience. Every Monday I had the day off, and I'd go up to what they call town, go up to London town, and sometimes I would catch a quick, we would call it Broadway show, but a London show like
Sure.
Phantom of the Opera,
Yeah.
and you could get really, really cheap tickets last minute. So I'd get to see all these shows. I'd get to go to incredible museums and art galleries. So it was a very cool year.
Yeah,
but at the end of it, I was exhausted.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things that good you have the experience and good that you have a simpler life now, probably.
That's right.
So take us from, this is what's fascinating about your story to me is studying music. And we're always going to build a bridge to MedPro, because MedPro is one of the most prestigious companies in the area. I don't want to steal too much of your thunder. I want to hear your description of MedPro. But it's a fascinating company. It's a large company. You're in a marketing role. You also have a learning and development role. But take us from how you got from music to all of that.
Yeah, that is. I asked myself that. A fair amount. So I've always had a kind of creative interest and a creative outlet, primarily expressed itself through music. And I've also found I've loved the kind of strategic, kind of critical thinking. And it was something that just, I grew up and I just found that it was something that came natural to me and I really enjoyed it. So how I got to MedPro was I was running my own lead generation business for CPAs in the UK. So I was living in Fort Wayne, but I was running a business for CPAs. And essentially what that meant was cold calling business owners in the UK and offering CPA services. What that really meant was getting up at about 4:15 in the morning, because this is the UK time zone.
Sure.
Going downstairs, pouring myself a strong cup of coffee, and getting on the phone and making calls. I'd make about 120, 125 phone calls a day. And when I started, I remember the first day, I can remember it like it was yesterday. The person who's supposed to be training me was out sick. So the company gave me a list. They said, this is kind of what you need to do. Good luck. So I make the first call. I'm terrified. I've never done this before. Sure. And it's 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah,
it's terrible.
I'm terrified and tired just hearing about it.
Oh, it was just, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Funny story, the first couple of calls, I made the calls, the decision maker wasn't there. I was kind of relieved because I didn't really want to have to speak to anybody. The third person on my list, this is a totally true story, was a window cleaning company. The owner's name was Mr. Crapper. I'm like, I'm getting punked here. This is... Anyway, I started doing it, got a little bit better at it. To kind of cut down a long story, in the end, I made 100,000 phone calls myself.
Wow.
And then started hiring people to work on my team, grew
Sure.
a business. And so I really, I guess, learned marketing and sales almost by accident, really from the ground up. I was meeting with a friend of mine for lunch, and he said, "What do you do?" And I essentially told him what I just shared with you. And he says, "Well, I lead part of this organization's called MedPro's direct sales team. Would you come and do some sales training?" I said, "Well, I don't know anything about insurance, but I'd be glad to tell you what I know from these many tens of thousands, 100,000 phone calls." I did a day's training. This was about 11 years ago. And he said, "Do you want a job?" I said, "Well, I got a job." He said, "Well, do you want to be a consultant?" I said, "Well, how about a part-time consultant?"
Sure.
So I was still running my own business in the UK, and then started working at MedPro. I was in a just kind of an entry-level marketing role. Took on increasingly numbers of MedPro's divisions, different products. About 5 years ago, I assumed the kind of VP of marketing position. and now I kind of do a few things along the way. So I don't know. I kind of fell into it, and I'm very, very grateful for it. But growing up, if someone had told me you're going to live in the U.S. and you're going to work for an insurance company, I'm not sure which I would have believed less.
Yeah, but, So going back to your move to Fort Wayne, because it's fascinating to hear other stories from transplants. Myself, having moved here, I'm the same way that I've now lived in Indiana longer than I lived in Massachusetts, more than half my life. So this is now more home than home is. What were your first impressions of Indiana? Your honest take on the Hoosier State when you first landed here?
Well, I arrived the first time, and I was on a little puddle jumper between Chicago and Fort Wayne, and it was in the summer, and there were massive storms. Mm-hmm. So I first arrived at Fort Wayne at 3 a.m. in the morning, and there was no one there to pick me up. And I called my friend, who was deep asleep at the time, and say, "Hey, it's Andrew. I'm here." He's like, "Who is this?" So my first experience of Fort Wayne was a little strange. I immediately noticed how flat it was. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was just in terms of the geography. What quickly became clear to me that the people here are just awesome and incredibly friendly. I was also struck by how much the entrepreneurial spirit of America that I hadn't experienced before. And there's, I became a citizen a year ago, so this will be my first election to vote in, which is cool. But I was very struck about we talk about America being the land of opportunity, and I really sensed that. I was also noticed the size of the cuisine. Food. There was a lot of food.
Yeah, especially in the Midwest. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there was lots of restaurants. And then when I first came to Fort Wayne, so I think 20 years ago, I couldn't believe that on the weekends nobody was in downtown.
Yeah.
You'd go down on the weekend. I mean, there wasn't really restaurants. It was like a ghost town.
Yeah.
You compare that to today, and that's pretty cool.
It's a whole different world. Yeah. The building we're doing the show in is Asher's Fort Wayne office. And I started working here 16 years ago, and I tell our new employees, our younger employees, when they start, that my lunch options were, I think it was Loaf and Ladle, Double Dragon, which is still open, Coney Island, and Dash In, and that was about it.
Right.
And now there's more places than you can hit in a month downtown. So it's changed quite a bit. Well, let's talk about this organization called MedPro. I've had the opportunity to work with you, so I know some things about it. But to a lot of people, it's a mystery because your client base isn't here.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about what MedPro is, what MedPro does, and what your experience has been during the time you've worked there.
Sure. So, let me start with MedPro. So, MedPro is the nation's largest healthcare liability company. So that means we provide liability insurance. Sometimes it's called MedMal insurance to healthcare providers. That can be everything from the largest hospital systems in the country to an individual nurse practitioner or a chiropractor and everything in between. We have about 300,000 customers. We have nearly $2 billion of annual premium, and we're based here in Fort Wayne. In fact, we're the oldest company in our industry. So MedPro was founded in 1899, and so we have a 120-year heritage. And it's pretty cool that MedMal was founded in Fort Wayne. It's amazing, really.
And Fort Wayne now has a pretty good toehold in the insurance industry. Different types of companies headquartered here.
Very much so.
I don't know if that's accidental or if that is just like attracting like, but it seems like one of Northeast Indiana's strong suits now.
Yeah, specialty insurance, and I serve on a couple of kind of partnership, collaborative thing, and that is pretty cool. So MedPro, we, as you rightly say, most of our customers aren't based here. We've got customers all over the U.S. We have customers in Europe, and so we have this big white building that's on the corner of Reed and St. Joe Center. And when I first came to MedPro, we didn't have a sign on our building, so people would drive past this kind of huge campus, and they weren't sure whether we were the FBI, a nursing home, the mafia.
Yeah.
Well,
it's not, I don't know if strange is the right word, but it's definitely an interesting building. It's got a circular type of campus and, these buildings that are curved. Right. So it kind of has this mysterious feel to it.
Yeah. So one of the things that we decided that maybe we should put a sign on our building so at least people know.
It's a pretty good marketing move. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty revolutionary, right?
Yeah.
Put a sign on the building.
Yeah.
So we have about 1,100 employees. We have about 500 or so in Fort Wayne, and then other folks that are all over the country, and then a few people in the UK.
Yeah. So your role, Andrew, is really a dual role. You have a marketing role and a training and development role. Talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about how you balance those roles and what teams you have working for you to help you in getting that done.
Yeah. So my primary job is the marketing leader. So that means I'm responsible for our marketing to our 18 different divisions, which think about different kind of customer types.
Sure.
I'm also responsible for, our overall branding and PR type activities. I mean, just typical kind of marketing activities, as you were. I also oversee our learning and development. We didn't really have any learning and development employees, and my boss, who's our CEO, said, "Listen, I want you to do that." So I do that too, and that's fun and interesting. We hired, I think, a couple hundred people last year. We've hired over 100 people this year, which is amazing, really, considering all that's going on with COVID-19.
Sure.
So I lead that, and that's everything from initial training to job-specific training to leadership training, which you've helped us with, and everything kind of in between.
Sure. So you're making, in many cases, the first impression on new employees and helping introduce them to the culture. That's obviously an important thing. What do you think is most critical in bringing people on board and making sure they're productive and ready to go from day one?
Yeah, I think when anybody starts a new job, you can feel overwhelmed. You don't know, maybe you don't know the industry, maybe you don't know the lingo, the acronyms, the systems, processes, the people.
Yeah.
What we want to try and do is help people really understand who MedPro is, why we do what we do, but most importantly, that they understand where they fit, where their contributions can make a difference. So we do that over 3 or 4 sessions across the first 3 or 4 months.
Sure. Well, and MedPro is part of a larger organization that has a very famous name. So you can talk a little bit about that, because that's been one of the things I think that MedPro, when it's well understood in Northeast Indiana, it's known as having some friends in Omaha, if you will. Yeah,
you could say it that way. So MedPro is owned by Berkshire Hathaway. We're part of the Berkshire Hathaway family. It really is, I think it's the best owner in the world. And there's a few reasons for that. And I think that's true for our customers, but I also think that's true for our employees. The Berkshire model, when you try and distill it down to the essence, is run your business like it's your family-only asset for a century. Do everything with complete integrity. Take care of your customer, and then Berkshire says, if you need anything, let us know. There's an incredible amount of empowerment and autonomy, very, very little bureaucracy, and that just gives us incredible stability with the financial strength of Berkshire Hathaway, the long-term thinking, and really gives us a massive canvas to really grow our business in the way that we think makes most sense with the support of Berkshire. And for our employees, it means they're part of an incredibly stable company. And we try and run our businesses, our divisions within our business, with that same degree of empowering and autonomy and accountability that Berkshire gives to us, and I think it's been part of the secret to our success.
Sure, and when you think about people in the public eye in terms of the business world, I honestly can't think of someone with a better reputation than Warren Buffett. I mean, someone who is respected pretty much universally, who, when it comes to integrity, has it beyond measure. So that's a nice thing to be tied to, for sure.
It's really awesome, and he is. I mean, if I could have half of his energy and intelligence and discernment and wisdom when I'm in my late 80s that he does, I'd be pretty happy about that.
Yeah. Well, it's a great thing for Northeast Indiana to have that tie as well. I mean, MedPro has grown quite a bit, if I'm not mistaken. Tell us a little bit about the growth. You mentioned the 100 new employees this year, but it goes beyond that. MedPro's been growing for a while.
Yeah, so when I joined MedPro a decade ago, I think we had about 400 employees. We have somewhere between 11 and 1,200 right now. That growth has been primarily driven by organic business growth. We've had a couple of acquisitions along the way, and really what we've tried to do is expand our offerings across the continuum of healthcare. So we used to, for 100 years, we wrote physicians and surgeons and dentists. Well, now we provide insurance offerings to hospitals and senior care facilities and ambulatory surgery centers and chiropractors and podiatrists and kind of everything in between. So that's really, the growth has been kind of across the continuum of healthcare, just some acquisition growth a little bit, and then obviously just organic growth within those more traditional businesses as well.
Yeah, well, in a year when most businesses are contracting, it's great to hear of a company that's growing and doing well. That's great.
Yeah, I don't take it for granted because I mean, we're going through very, very strange times, and I feel for lots and lots of businesses who, I think about the businesses typically we would have done hundreds of events, trade shows and conferences. Well, yeah. We're not doing any of those.
Sure.
And I think about those businesses and those organizations that, those events really provide a lot of income. I think about, the airline industry and the hotel industry.
Sure.
And, insurance is generally a pretty stable industry, even though it can have peaks and troughs.
Sure.
But it's been it has been good for. I mean, we have 1,100 employees. We had about 20% who worked from home, teleworking prior to this. We had to move everybody back, everyone in 2 days, and thankfully, our systems and our processes and our technology, but most important, our people, held up pretty well.
Sure. So what about your customers? And obviously, there's only so much you can say, but a lot of people, when they think about the impact of coronavirus, they think, oh, it's a boom for healthcare and the bottom line. And I don't think that's really the case. It's been very much a mixed bag for healthcare providers, especially hospitals. What have you experienced in terms of how this is affecting the healthcare community at large?
You said it well. It's all over the map. You might have a dentist office that shut down for months, had no revenue, or maybe they went part-time. You might have had hospitals that their emergency room might have been overwhelmed, but elective surgeries kind of shut down. Yeah. Their hospitals were largely empty. Yeah. And so I think
they don't make a lot of money off the ER.
No, I don't think so. And I think it was almost a misnomer that hospitals were just bursting at the seams. I think there were some emergency rooms that were, but largely healthcare really struggled. And we saw a growth in telemedicine, where instead of going to the hospital, you get on your smartphone and you see your doc. And I think that's going to accelerate the transition of the delivery of care in some way, just like we're doing far more virtual meetings and WebExes and Zooms, and it's likely that it'll never go back to quite the same way. I think the delivery of care will be like that as well. Yeah,
there was a quote that I heard that anything that was on the cusp of going digital has now gone digital and will stay digital, and virtual and remote factor into that. So whole different world for training and development, in many respects a whole different world for us as marketers, because we're having to reach consumers in a different way, reach our the stakeholders we serve in a very different way.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, when I think about our learning and development efforts, I feel for our new employees who you're joining a brand new organization, you're working from home, you got to figure out how you turn your laptop on and you get in, but also how do I do my job and how do I listen to other people? And we think that we will have far more flexibility where if we can balance the kind of individual work style, the needs of the customer, and also maintaining culture that gives more flexibility to our employees. If we can do those three things, I think we'll be in good shape.
Well, and it's really a competitive edge from a talent acquisition standpoint because people are getting used to having more flexibility. I mean, I've always said that the one thing I think that's a good outcome out of all this, while there's a lot of bad things about it, one of the good outcomes is I think everyone has been forced to acknowledge that their coworkers, their employees, however you want to put it, has a life outside of work. You know, you can't watch someone's kids run across in the background of a Zoom call and forget that that person is also a parent.
Right.
You know, and I think that's a good thing. We obviously still have to be productive. We still have to do our jobs, but the job doesn't necessarily always need to get done under the same constraints that we used to have.
I think that's right. And there's been some surprising benefits to communication. So if I take my team, about 50% of my team live and work out of the Fort Wayne office. About 50% of the team, or maybe a little bit less than that, are in different places around the country. Pre-COVID, we would have had a whole team meeting, and the people in Fort Wayne would have sat around a conference room. There wouldn't have been any video.
Yep.
The phone would have been on. The people who were remote couldn't see what was going on. They couldn't read body language. Maybe if maybe the phone got put on mute and someone would have a side comment and say, all of that is now gone.
Yeah, the disadvantage of being remote is no longer really there.
It's leveled the playing field.
Yeah, for sure.
Now everyone's a box in a Hollywood Square in web. We use WebEx, but Zoom or Microsoft Teams, and it's just far easier to see everybody's faces. Everyone. It's a far more level playing field, and I think that's been a good thing.
Yeah, and you know, as far as positive outcomes, there's a client that we're working with at Asher. I won't name the client, but we're doing research, and we ended up having to do virtual focus groups, which I was reluctant to do because I was just used to face, and it's yielded such better information. So, you know, we all hate change, we all hate the turmoil we're going through, but some of the outcomes are good and things we can learn from and improve going forward.
Yeah, it's on a personal note. I can be a little bit distracted, and I can be having a conversation and kind of looking around, and I'm still thinking, I'm engaging, but maybe my body language says, and so I've had to force myself to focus, and so at the end of what do they call it, Zoom fatigue or WebEx fatigue, at the end of an 8-9 hour day and with 12-14 meetings, I'm tired, but I feel like my attention has been more focused on the meetings than maybe before, and I probably needed the discipline.
Yeah, you and me both. Anyone who knows Andrew and I who's listening to this is probably amazed that you and I are able to focus on one thing at a time.
Right.
But it is something I think we're learning how to do in an environment where you're sort of tethered to your screen and you don't have the flexibility to roam as much. And there's some good outcomes of that too. Well, let's talk with all that change in mind and all the things that we're adapting to. Let's talk about some of the projects you're working on. When I speak of things that are challenging, things that are interesting, big ideas, big projects you're working on in today's environment. And feel free to talk, from a marketing perspective or learning and development perspective. What are some of the things that are taking up the majority of your time that you're most excited about, that are most frustrating, most interesting, however it is you want to put that?
Well, that's a great question, and I don't know that I have one very clean, crisp answer.
Sure.
One of the things I love about my job is the incredible variety that we have. So we might be thinking about how do we communicate to a dental student via Instagram, and another time we're talking about how do we communicate to a large hospital system. How do we communicate to a physician group in Miami, or thinking about how do we talk to a podiatrist in Seattle. So that is I really love the variety of that in the marketing sense. We're growing our business internationally. That's got complexities around branding and how do we think about that, and so that's interesting. We're also, just like everybody, thinking about how do we provide a digital experience for insurance. I mean, if you think about insurance, it's when I try to tell people a bit about what we do, I'm trying to gain some empathy and compassion. What I tell people is, I work in insurance. No one cares about insurance. It's highly regulated.
Yeah.
No one wants to talk about med mal insurance. We've got all these different divisions, competitors, and so I'm trying to hope people feel, wow, what a terribly hard job you must have, and Andrew, I feel so bad for you. It doesn't seem to work that way, but
yeah.
But I love the challenge of decommoditizing something like insurance and making it seem real.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I've had the opportunity to hear you speak about in the past is how you frame that so that your employees understand, and many of them understand it, innately, but for those who need a little help, how you put that into perspective, how you talk about what MedPro really does, the why for MedPro. How do you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, this concept of understanding a why is something that I learned from a very famous TED talk by Simon Sinek called Start With Why, and it talks about the 3 circles, what you do, how you do it, and why you do it. When you think about insurance and when we think about what we do, ultimately we exist to serve our stakeholders. Every business really has to do that. But really, our mission is to help our customers fulfill theirs. Insurance is a vehicle that allows business to happen. If there wasn't insurance, business and life in America would just shut down. So part of our mission, part of our why, is that we say that those who are providing care, those who are serving other people, shouldn't have to worry whether they themselves are protected. And when it comes to to healthcare liability insurance, there are times when there are mistakes where a provider makes a mistake and a patient should be indemnified. And that's what insurance does. There are other times when there could be a less than optimal outcome, but the provider totally followed the standard of care. And it's in those instances that we want to defend that provider's reputation, their assets, the way that they provided their care. And so I find that personally very satisfying. And I love that MedPro's in the intersection of 2 massive industries, insurance and healthcare.
Yeah, for sure.
And so if we can do our small part to help the delivery of care, to help care be delivered even more safely. And we can help our organizations, whether a dental practice, a podiatrist, chiropractor, a large hospital system, fulfill their mission, then I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's something all of us want. We want our healthcare providers to be focused on us, and we want them to sleep well at night and not be worried about the business end of things, at least not to any great extent. So that's a great service that people might not immediately think of when they think of MedMal insurance. So what are some of the other things that are on your mind as far as big projects, things you're working on, things you're grappling with? And one of the goals here is for other folks, other professionals, marketers, and others, just to get some perspective of what other folks are working on these days.
Yeah. So as it relates to, we're in the middle of a massive IT transformation project, multi-year project, where we're changing all of our systems, many of our processes, and our front-facing kind of branding. That's a big project, and
sounds like
it's super fun. We're also in the process of launching a tool called Salesforce Marketing Cloud, which is going to enable us to automate prospect and customer journeys. That's exciting because we get to think about customer journeys and the various ways to touch people.
So had you been using a CRM, another CRM in the past, and you're moving to a different CRM, or is this brand new for MedPro?
Yeah, we've been using a homegrown CRM system called Centric. No one probably would know that, and it was pretty clunky, pretty old. I mean, a CRM's only as good as the data that's entered into it. But if you can have a great tool like something like Salesforce, it really does help. Yeah,
well, a lot of it is just about removing friction for the user, so your people actually feel like it's easy to use, it's helpful to them on the end of the equation when they're talking to customers. If there is any friction, they're just not going to use it. They're going to find an end around, and people are smart. They'll find all kinds of ends around if you push them to that.
Yeah. And I would say, going back to kind of this idea of automating the customer journey, ease of use is becoming a key part of the value proposition for all manner of things.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, whether it's Amazon or your iPhone, and now if it's not as easy as that, people are saying, I'm not comparing you to your competitors in your insurance space. I'm comparing you to my shopping cart when I
Exactly.
check out on Amazon, and that's raised the bar on
Yeah.
the customer experience in a way that will never go back. And it's a good thing, but it's very, very challenging for every company.
Oh, sure. It's one of those things that we as consumers love, and as marketers, it drives us nuts because the bar keeps going up and we have to adapt, which is, ultimately, it's a net good for everyone, but it makes it very, very challenging along the way.
Yeah, Amazon has this concept of obsessive client focus, obsessive customer focus. Jeff Bezos talks about it all the time. The customer is, how does he say it, is wonderfully, frustratingly right.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to figure that out. And that's part of what we're doing. And, we've been doing this for 120 years. So insurance can be a bit slower than other industries to innovate.
Sure.
So how do we kind of extend our lead, but stay humble and become nimble, be entrepreneurial?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting, exciting challenge.
Sure. And you're dealing with it from two different perspectives, on the training side and then the marketing side.
Yeah, and on the learning and development or the training side, I hate box checking. Mm-hmm. I hate compliance training. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say that, but it's just training that doesn't make a difference.
Sure.
That doesn't move you forward.
Yeah.
So we've really grappled with how do we make our training lightweight, short bite-sized pieces.
Sure.
Just-in-time training is a concept that just when you need it, it's right there.
For sure.
I don't know that we have it all figured out yet, but we're on that journey.
Yeah, I don't know that many people have it all figured out. So just the fact you're thinking about it probably puts you at least a little ahead of the game. So that's good.
Yeah.
So as far as projects or things that are you're working on currently, anything else come to mind as especially noteworthy?
Well, part of my responsibilities, in addition to being the marketing leader and the learning and development leader, I also have serve on what we call a team committee, which is a few people who are responsible for all employee-related things. Mm-hmm. Figuring out where work gets done, how work gets done for our 1,200 employees has been something that I've had to give a lot of time and attention to over the last few months, as we spoke about a few minutes ago. That is both challenging and exciting.
Is the goal there to surface best practices that can be replicated throughout the organization? What's the end goal of looking at those work styles?
Yeah, it's very much so. I mean, one of the things that we're fortunate is that we have metrics so we can look at productivity and we can say, do people really are they productive when they are working from home?
Sure.
The good news is that the answer has largely been yes.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. We've also been trying to foster best practices around team communication and morale. I mean, I have great concern for our nation as a whole, the world as a whole, in terms of weariness that's come from COVID-19. I think that as we head into the winter, and who knows how things are going to go, but I really have some concern about that. I have concern about that related to the MedPro team. What can we really do to help an employee that might be silently suffering at home? They've got their kids at home and they're trying to balance additional responsibilities in terms of a demanding job, and that's been something that we've been trying to figure out.
Sure. Well, it's just a human need to have that interaction,
right.
And I think we needed that reminder with everything going digital. Sometimes we can push it too far, for sure. Well, Andrew, to wrap things up, we do 3 quick hit questions that are reflective of the questions we've already asked.
All
but
right.
This is the speed round of the show, if you will. So I'll give you a chance to absorb this a little bit. I'd like to hear one piece of advice for someone who is starting a career or retraining for a new career. What's the best thing someone can do to position themselves for success? Second thing that we'll talk about quickly is if you had just a few minutes to explain MedPro to someone, what would you say? And then the third piece of advice is if you were talking to a peer, someone, whether they worked in your industry or another industry, and they just needed some optimism, they needed to hear something about something positive about today's environment, what would you say? So let's start with the first one. You obviously have had a fascinating career. You've done a lot of different things, everything from, and it sounds like people just kind of leave you in the lurch. You arrive in Fort Wayne and people are saying, who's this guy?
Right.
You arrive, at a new employer and you're on your own with a stack of...
It's a terribly sad story, yeah.
Yeah, but that aside, what's your best piece of advice for people as they look to start a career or to retrain for a new one?
So one of the things that I get to do, that's one of the favorite parts of a job, is I get to interview people right when they get to the last stage of the interview process. So I probably interviewed 150 people this year. It means I get to meet a lot of people. I also get to intersect with them when they're at that point in time. And I often get asked that very specific question.
Yeah.
I think I'm not sure there's one piece of advice, but there's a few things. First is just do the blocking and tackling. I mean, you got to show up on time. You got to be, a good teammate. You got to do the job.
Sure.
I think beyond that, the people that, in my mind, really succeed are the people who are curious and who can figure out what the right questions are to ask. If you figure out what the right questions are to ask in any problem, you're more than halfway there to solving it. I think networking and being around other people, and again asking them questions, so blocking and tackling. Be curious, figure out how to ask good questions, and I think those things help.
Yeah, I love the comment about asking good questions. When I was younger, I thought being successful meant you had to have all the answers, and you and I both share a passion for training and development. And one of the things I've learned as a trainer is you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to have a unique perspective, because you're never going to say everything about a given topic,
right.
But you have to bring a unique perspective that hopefully engages people, gets them thinking. But one of the things that I believe is a good trainer helps people ask better questions, not necessarily have all the right answers.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Okay. So the second question, MedPro. Somebody stops you on the street,
Yep.
and you want to do a good job of describing what MedPro is all about. You have a couple minutes. What would you say?
Yeah, MedPro is the nation's largest healthcare liability insurance, part of the Berkshire Hathaway family, been around since 1899. A commitment to delivering for our stakeholders. And making a difference for our employees.
Great. You've already done that one. You've obviously done that one before, so good job.
Yep.
And then the third one, thinking about today's environment and offering a little bit of optimism, a little bit of perspective to other professionals who are trying to navigate their way through all this stuff. What's your best piece of advice for someone? Could be a marketer, could be someone else, in how to keep going forward with some positivity.
I'll try and answer this as quick as I can, but I'll tell you a story to answer the question. A number of years ago, I was sailing on a boat with a friend of mine. He had this awesome boat. We were on the south coast of England, and we go out on the boat, and we've been out about half an hour, and he says, okay, I'm going to go cook breakfast for you and me. He says, you're in charge. Well, I've only been on this boat for half an hour. I don't even know how to
once again
how to sail.
Left in the
exactly,
lurch.
Left
Yeah.
in the lurch. I know. It should be a country song. So he said, I want you to point the boat at that church spire. Just point at that, and if you see a massive boat, yell. That was it. That was his instructions.
Okay.
I did it, and there was almost no wind at all, and it was incredibly hard to keep this boat pointed in the right direction. He shows up half an hour later. We have lunch. We have a great day, and we turn around and come home. In the afternoon, the wind picked up, and he said, "I want you, you drive the boat." So I've got this massive. It's not steering wheel. What do you call it on a boat? It's not.
Let's call it a steering wheel.
All right, steering wheel. It's not. People are listening. They're gonna be like, "No, it's not a steering wheel." Anyway, and he said, "I want you to take your little finger, put it on top of this wheel, and you can control it with your little finger." The wind behind made that so easy.
Huh.
And it was so notable, the difference between gripping this wheel when there was no wind and then holding it with my little pinky and going exactly in the direction I wanted to go much quicker. I tell you that story to say that there have been times in my life and career where it just things didn't seem to be going well, and everything you tried to do didn't quite work. There's been other times, maybe not quite so often, where you could just control things with your little pinky and everything just fell into place. I say that to say that when things are going poorly, generally a leader is not as bad as they look. And when things are going well, they're generally not as good as things look. So my encouragement would be to colleagues, to peers, if it's tough right now, hang in there because the wind can turn and it will get easier. Do the things that you know are important. Do the fundamentals well, and I found that over a few decades of working, things kind of work out.
Yeah, well, that's great advice, and from someone who knows something about change and some adversity, having moved here from the UK. And congratulations, by the way, on becoming a U.S. citizen.
Thanks.
Time to vote. That's great.
Yep.
Andrew is also a triathlete and has given me some advice on that score. So now that I've mentioned that, I'm committed to doing one in 2021.
Good, good for you. I'm I'm a triathlete from a few years ago, so I'm committed to do one in 2021 as well.
All right, great. Well, we'll make that happen together.
Sounds good.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for your time, and thanks everyone for listening to the Asher Marketing Podcast. We will be back next week, and we hope to see you then. Thanks.